Hello, welcome to a new episode of Geek Lunch Me. I'm your host Chris. As usual, I hope you're well out there. It's been absolutely freezing in the UK this week. It's struggled to barely get above freezing. I know a lot of my viewers are in the US. I know there's quite a few states over there that have been absolutely freezing cold, lots of snow as well. So I hope you're good where you are. What I thought we'd do is have a look at all the Star Wars films that Disney have announced and that have sort of sadly not come to pass. Yeah, since the House of Mouse bought Lucasfilm and took over Star Wars production, they've got a habit of they keep announcing movies that then fall along the wayside, usually for the much cited creative differences, which we'll go into in a bit. They also do it a bit with the MCU, the Inhumans movie that then became a pretty crappy TV show. There's sort of various other Marvel projects that have fallen by the wayside that have been announced at these big presentations that they do. But certainly Star Wars has had the lion's share of them, as it were. And if you like the video, don't forget, hit the thumbs up. It helps us out a great deal. Gets the video seen by a lot more people. And if you've not already subscribed, smash that subscribe button. I would absolutely love to have you as a subscriber. Lots of good content coming up this year. So we'll go through these in a sort of chronological order, and then we'll have a look at the films that have been announced are supposedly still going ahead, and we'll have a look and see what we think the odds are of those actually taking place.
Never tell me the odds.
So up first, rather topically, as it's just been released on Netflix, is the Zack Snyder Star Wars movie that became Rebel Moon. Now, my theory on this one is that I don't think it's as big a story as Snyder has made out. From interviews that he's done whilst promoting Rebel Moon, I get the feeling he pitched an idea to Lucasfilm. This was just before Disney bought them out. He pitched them an idea for a movie, and they basically said no. And I think that's pretty much as far as it goes. I think the idea that this was a Star Wars script, which was then sort of turned into Rebel Moon, I think has been spun a bit by Netflix in its promotion of Rebel Moon to sort of drum up more interest in it. If you've seen Rebel Moon, you'll know it's basically another remake of The Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, Bug's Life, Battle Beyond the Stars. A story of a small group of villagers who are being terrorized, so they go out to recruit a bunch of heroes to save them. Now, interestingly, I remember when it was announced that Disney had bought Lucasfilm, that whole sort of big news story came out of the blue. I remember reading a big article about it and saying about the various different films that were going to be coming our way. I remember there being an Obi-Wan movie that had been pitched, which we'll come on to later on. And I remember reading in one article that there was a Seven Samurai style movie that had been pitched that was going to feature Yoda and just a bunch of aliens. There weren't sort of going to be any human characters in it, which I thought at the time sounded a really good idea. Now I'm wondering if that sort of Zack Snyder story idea was sort of mixed up in this article. So that sounded to me something quite an interesting idea, and I would have liked to have seen that. Rebel Moon, on the other hand, I mean, you've seen all the reviews. If you're a Zack Snyder super fan, you'll think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone else thinks it's average to downright atrocious. Depending on who you speak to. I thought it might be an interesting exercise watching it and seeing where the Star Wars influences are. And to be honest, apart from, the fact that you've got a big tyrannical force and some downtrodden people sort of like rebelling against them. But that sort of storyline has been done, millions of times in all sorts of different genres. There was the obvious, there was Bayduna's character who had basically twin lightsabers, But apart from that, I thought it sort of cribbed more from Warhammer, the Games Workshop universe. But the bad guys with the sort of religious aspect and the way they looked, I thought was very Warhammer-ish. Chronicles of Riddick, I thought, was in there a lot. There's loads of other influences. But personally, I think Star Wars dodged a slow motion bullet with that one. So I'm not really bothered that we didn't get Zack Snyder's Star Wars. I would still like to see a movie starring just aliens and no one else set in the Star Wars universe. I think that'd be an interesting idea. So we then move on to Josh Trank's Boba Fett movie. That was another one that was mentioned in the sort of initial articles when Disney bought out Lucasfilm. A report said it was basically going to be a Western in space. Now it's easy to see how this has transformed and become the Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett's shows that we got later on. So Josh Trank sort of burst onto the scene with Chronicle, which I absolutely loved. One of those found footage films where some teenagers find sort of an alien artifact that gives them superpowers, which then obviously end up corrupting some of them. And you get an idea of sort of like what would happen with evil superheroes. done pretty much on the cheap. I think it's a great movie, really interesting. He then unfortunately got embroiled in the Fantastic Four movie, which is still one of those films. I've never actually finished it. I usually make a point, even if I'm not enjoying it, I'll watch a film to the end so I can sort of form my own opinions. For some reason, I've seen Fantastic Four, the beginning of it, a couple of times when it's been on TV, and I've just never made it to the end, which probably says, you know, a lot about it. I know there were a lot of problems on set. The studio sort of took it, completely recut the ending. Apparently sort of the second half of the movie doesn't make much sense. It's completely sort of different than what was originally shot. But reports also say apparently Josh Trank had a lot of problems on set with him. There have been reports that he may have had sort of some drinking and drug problems that spilled over onto the set, and basically it was going to be announced that he was directing the Boba Fett movie at one of the big Star Wars celebration events. He was all set to turn up, and then basically he did not, and he left. I think citing again the creative differences. He basically jumped before he was pushed. He knew that Disney was basically going to sack him pretty shortly. So the movie was cancelled, not just because he left, but obviously by this time Solo had come out and caused a problem where it had been Star Wars first box office bomb, and they sort of suddenly had pivoted away, and Disney Plus was on the horizon, so we got a series instead. Same thing with Obi-Wan. Stephen Daldry was all set to shoot Obi-Wan. It was going to differ from the TV show. It was going to be set purely on Tatooine. There was going to be a conflict with sort of the moisture farmers and the Tusken Raiders, and Obi-Wan was going to have to sort it all out without obviously revealing that he is Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi Knight. Now, I don't think there's any big drama as to why this one got cancelled. I don't think it wasn't a problem with Stephen Daldry or the script or anything like that. I think basically it was in the aftermath of the Solo debacle, and Disney basically pulled the plug on a whole bunch of Star Wars movies that were coming our way. We then got the exciting at the time news that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the two guys in charge of Game of Thrones, Disney had given them a Star Wars trilogy, and I think based purely on the fact that obviously Game of Thrones was this big sort of fantasy, medieval, old worldy epic, that we were going to get a sort of Knights of the Old Republic style story looking back at the history of the Jedi. As I say, there was nothing really anything official about that, but recently, whilst doing the publicity for their Three Body Problem series, it's coming to Netflix shortly, they basically did say yes, they were doing a sort of First Jedi movie, which we now know is apparently going to be the subject of James Mangold's up-and-coming movie, which we'll talk about in a little while. But eventually, it then turned out that Benioff and Weiss walked away. A lot of it was to do with the fact they signed a $280 million deal with Netflix. As I say, the Three Body Problem, I think, is the first fruits of that labour. And it was interesting to see that, fans went from being really excited that the guys from Game of Thrones were now doing a Star Wars trilogy, and then after we had the final lackluster season of Game of Thrones, suddenly, the whole geek world turned against them, and suddenly everyone was relieved that we weren't getting a Star Wars trilogy from them. Personally, I love Game of Thrones. Yes, the last season is very lackluster. It's rushed. I know at the time people were saying, they've rushed it because they've gone off to do this big Star Wars deal. I don't think it was anything like that at all. I think they had just decided they wanted to move on with something else. They'd done Game of Thrones for so many years. There weren't any published books to follow at this point. The whole storyline with what happened with Daenerys, I think, was exactly the way to go. Yes, it was just very rushed and should have been done over a longer period of time. But yes, anyway, off they went to Netflix, and we did not get their intended trilogy. And then the Guillermo del Toro Jabba the Hutt movie. Reports of this have come about sort of in the last few months with Guillermo del Toro. And apparently, yes, he was working on a Jabba the Hutt movie, a sort of crime story, a sort of rise and fall of Jabba the Hutt in the style of The Godfather, which sounds like it would have been fantastic. I love Guillermo del Toro. Ever since his early films, Kronos, Devil's Backbone, his fantastic Hellboy movies. And it's a shame we were robbed of getting a Star Wars movie from him. A bit like we were also robbed from him getting to do The Hobbit as well, which just dragged on for so long, the sort of pre-production on that he basically jumped ship and said, no, this is taking too long, I went to do something else. So I would love to have seen his take on The Hobbit. I imagine it would have been better than the massively bloated trilogy we got. Whether he would actually ever come back and do a Star Wars Jabba the Hutt movie, who knows? I suspect it's something now that Disney wouldn't commit the huge resources to make a movie now, and I don't think Guillermo del Toro would probably do it for Disney Plus. So yeah, for me, absolute shame that we will never get Guillermo del Toro's take on Jabba the Hutt. We then got Patty Jenkins was announced that she was going to be doing a Rogue Squadron movie. And this got to the point that we actually got this sort of teaser trailer they put out for it, announcing it. I'll put a link to the video in the description below if you've not seen it. And yeah, I was really looking forward to it. The Rogue Squadron books that they brought out in the old expanded universe were great. I enjoyed all those. The idea of a sort of Top Gun in space sounds a great idea. Following this unit of rebel fighters, it was potentially some really good stuff we would get there. It was then postponed, apparently originally due to Wonder Woman 3 scheduling conflicts that she was working on. Obviously, then after Wonder Woman 2 absolutely bombed, and what with COVID happening, the pandemic and things like that. It was put on the back burner. It was still sort of kept saying it was coming, but now it's basically quietly disappeared. It's been taken, I think, off the release schedule. It's one of those ones that we may see something further down the line. Whether Patty Jenkins will be involved, who knows? Whether they take the initial idea and tweak the story and it becomes something else, I don't know. But yeah, Rogue Squadron, I was looking forward to that. And that sort of seems like that's definitely disappeared off into the ether at the moment. Don't expect to see that one anytime soon. And from there, we move on to the Kevin Feige Star Wars movie. This one sort of, I don't know even how much this one got off the ground. I don't recall it ever being an official announcement from Disney. Kathleen Kennedy, obviously the head of Lucasfilm over there, she sort of says that it wasn't ever a thing. Now, the Russo brothers, who obviously worked under Feige making Avengers Infinity War at Endgame, they say they were approached about it. And they were definitely in a sort of tentative opening stages of talking about it. So I think there were definitely talks inside Disney about getting Feige on board, which makes absolute sense. Obviously, Avengers Endgame, made squillions of dollars. And if there's one thing we've seen, Disney tend to pounce on, directors who are suddenly, massively successful, and sort of give them projects. And as we've seen, whether or not they actually come to fruition is another matter. So yeah, the Kevin Feige movie, who knows what it would have been about? I don't even know if they got that far into story planning. And as I say, Kathleen Kennedy says it wasn't even a thing to begin with. But I think there was definitely something in there. But again, that one's gone away and isn't happening. Then an interesting one, obviously the Phil Lord and Chris Miller version of Solo, a Star Wars movie. They sort of very famously was sort of taken off the project. Sort of only weeks left of filming, and to get Ron Howard to step in, completely retool it and change it quite a bit. And this is one I hope eventually we get to see some footage from. Now, I know it sort of seems like something that Disney would keep a lid on, but there's obviously hours of footage somewhere featuring, completely different scenes. Obviously, the villain was not Paul Bettany. And because of sort of Lord and Miller's background with the Lego movie and was it the 21 Jump Street movies they did, there was a lot more. They allowed a lot more improvisation on set, apparently. And this is what sort of Disney didn't like. And they didn't like the tone, sort of jokey tone, that the movie was going down. And this is like a classic case of, why bring on these type of directors if you then don't want the sort of product that they're known for producing? Obviously, since then, they've gone on to do the Spider-Verse animated movies, which are absolutely fantastic and everyone loves. So yeah, it's a real shame for me that we didn't get to see Solo play out as originally intended. Who knows whether or not that would have saved it from the box office. I'm not convinced. I know a lot of people say that one of the problems with its low box office was the fact that there had been this much publicised, sacking of the directors sort of way into production. But personally, I know we like these things because we're geeks. That's why I have this YouTube channel. If you're watching, that's probably why you're watching. Your average, public cinema goer. Most people, I get the impression from, don't even know who is directed, the movie that they're going to watch. That's not what they're interested in. They're not sort of saying massive geeks like us that like to look at the minutiae of a movie and how it's produced and things like that. I guarantee you that most people didn't even know anything about Lord and Miller and the sacking from Solo. I think most of it was a combination of it was following on hot the heels from The Last Jedi, which has sort of polarised the fan base. And that mostly, I think the fact that it was a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford, and also the trailers were very lackluster as well. But yeah, that's just my personal opinions. If you've got a different opinion, drop it in the comments below. Always interested to read what you've got to say. But yeah, hopefully one day I'd love to see some leaked footage online of the original Lord and Miller Solo. But I don't know, Disney tend to keep a sort of tight grasp of these things. So who knows on that one. We've then got sort of briefly on Colin Trevorrow's episode 9. He was originally brought on to direct episode 9. Again, he was a director that suddenly had big success. Jurassic World made billions of dollars. Duel of the Fates, his film was called. We know this because you can read the entire leaked script online. It's got a lot more to do with I think like Finn and the Stormtrooper rebellion. And it's very Princess Leia centric as well, which obviously things would have actually been changed with the untimely death of Carrie Fisher. I haven't read the entire script. I've read bits of it. It's a very different beast to what we actually got with the Rise of Skywalker. Would it have ultimately saved the sequel trilogy? I don't think so. The complete lack of planning of a coherent storyline across the 3 films, I think, had already probably doomed it to not be as successful as what we would have hoped. I think The Last Jedi had taken so many story threads from Force Awakens and just sort of done away with them and done its own thing. I don't think you were ever really going to get a third part that was going to be able to unify or into a satisfying whole, unfortunately. But yeah, if you want to see what could have been, Google Duel of the Fates script from Colin Trevorrow. It's all online. You can check it out. So from there, let's move on to movies that are supposedly, allegedly going to happen sometime in the future. So the first one is the Rian Johnson trilogy. This is an interesting one. It's the trilogy that won't die. It was announced just before Last Jedi got released. Disney announced that they had given Rian Johnson his own trilogy that was going to be completely set apart from the sort of the Skywalker saga. Now, it's easy to see why at the time the critics were raving about The Last Jedi, saying it was one of the best Star Wars films, up there with Empire Strikes Back. And there's Disney had no reason to believe that the fans weren't going to agree. But there's obviously a lot of backlash, mostly to do with sort of the handling of Luke and his storyline. And since then it's gone absolutely quiet. But just when you think, this is something that they've basically just swept under the carpet, Rian Johnson will do an interview for something else and it will get mentioned and he'll say, we're still hoping to do it one day. But who knows on this one? I think there would be a huge fan backlash. There's always other movies that have sort of announced being coming out that will take up the next 6 or 7 years of release schedule. So I personally don't think we'll ever get to see Rian Johnson's trilogy. Whether or not you think that's a good or bad thing based on your opinion of The Last Jedi is entirely up to you. Another film which may or may not happen is the Taika Waititi movie. Now again, I love Taika Waititi. I would love to see his take on a Star Wars movie, but I know that a lot of people out there, especially after Thor Love and Thunder, who have gone off the man. And again, it's another film that you sort of think, that's easy going to get swept away. But from time to time, he'll still come out with things and say, yes, he's still working on the script, still working on the story. Being the type of guy he is, he occasionally says things like, he reckons it will really piss off all the Star Wars fans. So who knows? Disney need a win at this moment, so it's easy to see why they're not going ahead with Taika Waititi's movie at this time. Whether or not, again, it happens in the future, only time will tell. Then we've got another film we know virtually nothing about, Sean Levy, who directed Free Guy and a lot of the episodes of Stranger Things, and of course the upcoming Deadpool 3, which is the only MCU movie coming this year, so they're pinning their hopes on that. Sean Levy apparently is doing a Star Wars movie. Apart from that, we know literally nothing about that, nothing of when it's set, or when it's going to possibly come out. As I say, the release schedule, according to the movies they have announced, is going to be 6 or 7 years again in the future. So who knows on that one. And then Lando, which was announced, we were going to be getting a TV show with Donald Glover on Disney Plus, and then we heard, I think it was last year sometime, that possibly it was being retooled as a movie, and that Donald Glover and his brother were the ones who were actually working on the script. Again, that seems like another one, which I'll believe it when we see it. I thought the idea of sort of the Lando Calrissian Chronicles on Disney Plus was a great idea. Now, with Disney Plus not looking so hot, Kevin Feige said they've done quantity over quality on the MCU programs on there, and I think Lucasfilm have done the same with Star Wars, and that we're going to be getting a lot less Star Wars and MCU content on Disney Plus because of that. And again, with the release schedule, who knows when we may or may not see a Lando movie. I personally would like to see something, whether it's on Disney Plus or in a movie, but I doubt they would do it in the movie, to tie up that whole Solo Lando storyline and Kira and Crimson Dawn and Darth Maul. It's a shame that if they're going to bring him back, and we just get him in that one short scene at the end of Solo, in live action, it would be a shame not to see what happens with the whole crime syndicate. So I think there's a massive story there with that whole sort of the crime syndicates and the Hutts, and again whether or not Guillermo del Toro's movie would have touched on that. I think there's a whole big storyline there looking at the underworld of Star Wars, and I'd love to see someone do, and I think it would work really well as a series on Disney Plus, but who knows. And then we've got definitely maybe actually happening movies. So they've just announced The Mandalorian and Grogu. I did a video on that last week. So Jon Favreau is directing a Mandalorian and Grogu movie. It's sort of come out of the blue. There were rumours that season 4 of Mando was going to become a movie, and indeed it has. There's now rumours swirling around that season 4 is still going to be happening as a TV show, and this is just a separate movie. As I said before, it's easy to see why Disney, they need a big win. Mando is probably their hottest Star Wars property at the moment. Probably not as hot as it was after season 2. I think Book of Boba Fett and season 3 of Mando have sort of taken the shine off it a bit. But yeah, that is fast tracked and it's going to go into production this summer. We may even get that next year. So I won't go into too much detail, so check out my other video, but I think that might be a smaller production telling a one-off isolated story. Yeah, there'll definitely be references to other stuff in there, as they always do. But I think they're going to do that, produce it cheaper, and try and make a big profit on that. We've then got the Rey movie, which was going to be the next Star Wars movie. Don't forget, we haven't had a movie in cinema since 2019. So, it's been 6 years already, and it's going to be a little while longer to wait. So the rumours at the moment is that maybe the Rey movie has been delayed indefinitely. Lucasfilm, apparently a spokesman, has said no, that's not the case. It's still going ahead and it's still on schedule. Now the only thing is they've never actually given us a schedule. We've never actually had a date. There were rumours that it was going to start filming early this year. That doesn't look like it's the case. Damon Lindelof worked on the script. He then left with creative differences. I think when they were striking last year, he was quoted on the picket line as saying it was far more fun striking than it was writing a Star Wars script. Stephen Knight of Peaky Blinders fame is apparently working on the script. It's still not finished, apparently. He's got Peaky Blinders movie coming up as well on his schedule. So yeah, Lucasfilm say the Rey movie is still on. Other sources will tell you no, it's not happening anytime soon. I think we will get it eventually. I think the fact that you've got this open time period now where you can do whatever you want after Rise of Skywalker, and obviously Rey was the main character. I don't think Disney will just go ahead and then just start a completely different story with different characters in that time period. I think Rey will be an anchor to it, at least to begin with. So I expect we'll see that Rey movie, but I don't think we will probably get it for a couple of years. Then, as I mentioned before, James Mangold's first Jedi movie. And again, he's another director that everyone was excited about. Everyone loves Logan. And then obviously he's done Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which was a sort of massive box office failure for Disney last year. So yeah, it could be a knee-jerk reaction. Will they can him cite creative differences again? The idea of a Star Wars movie set thousands of years in the past is really exciting. They can do lots of different things with it. I think there are a lot of fans who will be up for that. Whether or not we actually end up ever getting that movie, who knows? I think we will get a movie set sort of thousands of years before. Whether it ends up being directed by James Mangold is another matter. And then lastly, we've got Dave Filoni's Mandoverse movie. Obviously, yes, they announced that Dave was going to be doing... So originally they said that we were going to get, Dave Filoni's movie was going to tie together all the storylines of the TV shows, and we were going to get, this big finale on the big screen, presumably with Thrawn as, as the big bad guy, and the whole sort of heir to the Empire feel to it. Now, obviously, we then lost the Rangers of the New Republic TV show, which presumably was going to star Gina Carano, and then obviously she sort of did a right-wing meltdown, and Disney dropped her like a hot potato. And then Thrawn has now been introduced via the Ahsoka show. And yes, Disney Plus has sort of gone off the boil a bit, and we're not getting as many shows in the future. So who knows whether Dave Filoni's movie is, presumably is still going to tie everything together. But The Marvels was another one of Disney's massive box office failures last year. And I think people seem to say a big part of that was the fact that you had to have seen the Ms. Marvel TV show and WandaVision, really, and the trailers featured these characters that if you hadn't watched those shows, you didn't even really know who they were. And obviously for Captain Marvel to go from being an over $1 billion earner on the first movie. I know that was in the run-up to Endgame, so you could say that some of the box office comes from there. But for a character to go from having $1 billion movie to a movie that didn't even make its budget back in a couple of years is pretty incredible. And if that is to do with the fact that people sort of, weren't invested in the TV tie-ins, it does make you wonder that Disney's going to look at that and say, well, maybe having a Mandoverse movie that ties all the shows together is not financially such a good idea. I think Filoni is such, characters are so ingrained at Lucasfilm now. I think he got promoted to head creative director or something there, and he's very well loved. So I think we will see him do a movie, and I think Ahsoka will be in it as she's his baby. Whether it will end up being that whole encompassing movie that brings all the TV shows together, we'll wait and see. So that's pretty much every Star Wars movie that was announced and then disappeared under Disney's regime. Were there any of them you were really looking forward to that you're disappointed that we're not now getting? Let me know in the comments below. As I say, always good to read your comments. I always try to reply to as many of them as possible. So that's it from me. Take care. Until next time, eat, geek, and be merry.